What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Cheese Talk podcast. I'm your host, Brian Rago. Tonight, I'm joined with Riley O'Brien. He is a NFC North fan of the Detroit Lions. But before I get to my guest, I would like to give a shout out to the Open Network for giving me the platform or the do the podcast under their umbrella as Ohana underscore Packers. You can find him on Twitter. Riley, what's up?
Not much, man. Excited to jump on with you, talk some football. Appreciate you asking me to come on, and excited for the opportunity.
For sure. How long you been a Lions fan for?
Oh, gall. Since 2003. Yeah, so however many years that's 21 years. I didn't like football until I was in ninth grade, but my buddy Trevor was a diehard Carolina Panthers fan. He got me into football that year, so I was like, all right, I need to pick my own team, and landed on the Detroit Lions.
What made you pick the Lions?
Yeah, it was the fact that they weren't good. So with Trevor, with the Panthers being an expansion team, I thought it was cool that he was with them kind of from the get-go. And, there's not expansion teams every year. So I was like, all right, well, the next best thing would be I also wanted to pick a team that hadn't won a Super Bowl. Now, in 2003, Carolina went to the Super Bowl. They lost to the Patriots. I watched that game with him. And I know the Lions had a championship in like 1951, but I just wanted to pick a team that I felt like I wasn't jumping on a bandwagon. And I don't know what it was, but I just went through a process and narrowed it down and landed on Detroit.
So, would you consider yourself like a diehard Lions fan now, or you just kind of
100%? Yeah,
100%?
it's like in my blood now. For the crazy thing is, years later, my grandma gives me this baby book, and I'm flipping through it, and I am, all these pictures of me as a fat, chubby kid with a mullet, and I get to this page, and I'm like, in the backyard at their house holding a Detroit Lions helmet. So I started going around everybody in the house. I'm like, whose helmet was this? Nobody knows where it came from. I'm like, I guess it was just, meant to be. But yeah, man, it's, I watch every snap. Even if, I live in Utah. So even if Utah were to eventually get an NFL team, my allegiances and loyalties lie with the Detroit Lions.
That was my next question. I'm like, do you live in Michigan, or you just somehow just picked the Lions? You said because of their record, and like they
Yeah.
weren't really good, and
Yeah. I've only ever been. I was in. Was at the Detroit airport for like an hour for a layover. That's the only time I've ever been out there. Yeah, when I was shooting 2003, I didn't even know really where Michigan was in relation to Utah. I just was like, all right, that's my team, and picked them, and then it's been them ever since.
right on, right on. Yeah, it's I mean, they're a storied franchise, It's a team the Packers have had their number for quite some years. It's well, I like the Lions more than I like the Bears, so it's if that's
Right.
if that's anything. Here in Green Bay, we're not too fond of any of the Bears. So
Well,
what?
the Lions probably haven't given you guys enough reasons over the years to dislike him. You almost kind of probably have felt bad for him. It's like the little brother, So, but hopefully that's changing here. Within the last couple of years, and hopefully to come.
Yeah, you can tell the Lions they're trying to build success, and they're actually making the right moves with what they're doing. Which brings me on. What are your thoughts on this last year's draft for the Lions?
Yeah, I was extremely happy with it. One of the main hosts, and I'm assuming, Brian, probably how you kind of came to get in contact with me is I'm part of the Talking Football podcast with Justin Treese and Austin Cunningham and Dan Kiefer. And this summer, I just started doing interviews with guests, and kind of just a way to help us grow and get to tell other people's stories. And when I was interviewing with Jeremy Reisman, for sure, from the Pride of Detroit, but I think even with a few others I've mentioned, Justin Treese and he's done this since we've been friends in high school. I swear he can predict the future. So every year I ask him, like, the day of the draft, like, okay, all of the mock drafts are done. All the workouts are done. The projections have been made. Who do you want the Jags to take? Because he's a Jacksonville Jaguars fan. And this year it was Terrion Arnold. And so for me, I was like, okay, anytime the Lions get somebody that he wanted in Jacksonville, I'm all for it. So last year, that was the weakness of the Detroit Lions, was the secondary. By the end of the year, they're playing guys like Kendall Vildor, who, not a knock on him, but they just ran through the depth chart. So they're playing fifth string guys that weren't even on the team at the start of the year, are starting and playing significant snaps in the NFC Championship. So to get Terrion Arnold, to get Ennis Rakestraw, I thought were great picks that addressed a major need. And I think Arnold for sure, and Rakestraw will see some snaps this year, but they drafted guys that will play, which doesn't always happen when you have a good team. Usually you're getting a starter in the first round, but I think that these guys will come in and be able to help the team right away. So I was happy with the first 2 rounds. Out here, I'm a huge Utah Ute fan, so I was extremely happy when they took Sione Vaki. He's been doing well in camp. Not a surprise to me and to some of my other friends that are Utah Ute fans. He's just a great player, and then they address some people or some needs along the line. So Brad Holmes has a proven track record. He's like a godsend for the Detroit Lions organization. He's proven that he's pretty dang good on his draft picks, and so I trust him. And I was very happy with the haul that they got this last year.
So obviously, with being a fan of a team in the NFC North, you probably, not by choice, kind of follow the Packers as well. So, like, what are your thoughts on the process from going from Aaron Rodgers to the rebuild last year that we went through, quote unquote, with Jordan Love, and what do you think of Brian Gutekunst as a GM?
Well, the Green Bay Packers to me are like a gold standard of how an organization should be run. With my ties to Utah, I also was aware of Jordan Love, given that he was up in Logan, Utah, about an hour and a half from where I live. And I remember last year the game, and you might remember this as well, Brian. The game at Thanksgiving on Thanksgiving at Detroit. I think it was somewhere in the second quarter, but Jordan Love makes this throw that went through the arms of like 3 defenders.
And wasn't that to like Jaden Reed in the end zone? I forgot who it was.
Yeah,
Jaden Reed or Romeo Dobbs. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
It was one of the best throws I've ever seen, and that was the play where I was like, oh man, come on, like this might be a long day, but you love the competition. But I do kind of feel like, man, can the Lions finally have gotten to a point where they're a good team, and it just seems like the Packers, they rarely have down years. Even at the start of last year, it felt like there was a period of time where I don't know if Jordan Love was kind of just finding his niche in the offense, and they were kind of tailoring to it. I think my opinion is he started thinking less and just kind of reacting and just playing football.
Right.
And I think that it's kind of that thing like in Breaking Bad, like they can't keep getting away with this. How you go from, Favre to Rodgers, and then what Love has shown us in a short period of time. I don't think there's a team in the league that wouldn't be happy to have him as their starting quarterback. So I think the Packers are obviously a very well-run organization, and no doubt the Lions are going to have to go through Green Bay. It's a tough division, but I think that for sure the Green Bay Packers are a force to be reckoned with for sure.
Yeah, you mentioned like going from Rodgers, from Favre, and then from to Love. Do you think more teams will start trying to? I mean, I know it's always their goal is like to draft like the next best quarterback in their franchise, but you think they want to draft and have someone sit behind it for 3 or 4 years to learn from that veteran? Or do you think they want success like now and they're too impatient? Like kind of what, in my eyes, I mean, following the Chicago Bears kind of via the NFC North, it just seems like they have no idea how to develop quarterbacks at all.
Yeah, I don't know if people are patient enough. And that's like in every walk of life, right? Where there's just this like immediate, what have you done for me lately kind of mindset. And it just seems like there are the when it works, like when Mahomes was tutored and mentored by Alex Smith, and we saw Rodgers do it for Favre and then Love do it for Rodgers, but there are far more examples of organizations and teams not willing to take that approach where, and usually the team that's drafting number 1 overall is looking for a quarterback and they're not good. And so they're like, we might as well just throw them in there now and let them start getting the reps and the experience. And I don't know, it seems like if you could do that, that would be great. I think the Lions maybe were kind of doing that last year with, they had expectations that Goff would play well. He did. But
Right.
you'd have a chance with somebody like a Hendon Hooker where if this doesn't pan out and Goff, wants to get a contract somewhere else, obviously that all played itself out. But maybe they were in line to be ready to do something like that where you're not drafting a guy and throwing him in the starting lineup the first week. So I don't know. I think all teams would love to have that, but I just don't know that they're willing to be as patient as you'd have to be to make it happen.
Yeah, it's kind of like you mentioned Mahomes, and you look at like Andy Reid, and you got to think of, and you think back to like Mariucci and all these guys that are from like the Green Bay coaching tree from how far back to when they had Mike Holmgren, and you look at some of those old team photos and some of the assistant coaches, and it's all, oh my God, there's Mariucci, there's Andy Reid, there's John Gruden, there's all these guys that spread out. Yeah, Mahomes is a good example of how you want to build your quarterback. I mean, some of the stuff that he does is just blows my mind. I don't get it, And sometimes I think the refs are a little bit too lenient towards the Chiefs, but that's just me. There's some plays in the last few years in playoff games where it's like, how do you even call that, But what last year? What do you think was your strength and your weakness in Detroit?
The weakness, I would say for sure, would be the secondary play. The strength of the team. This is the offensive line for sure. I think the calm and control that Jared Goff runs the offense with. There was Sam Laporta had a great rookie season, obviously. It's hard to top that. So the hope is just kind of like, let's just get that again. I think that for this upcoming year, I would say the weakness and concern would be the receiving room, where you've got Amon-Ra St. Brown as your locked in, surefire number 1 receiver. It's lined up for Jameson Williams to be the number 2 receiver, and the offense is set up in a way where with Gibbs being able to run underneath routes, Laporta running those intermediate routes, and same with St. Brown, that Jameson Williams should be able to take deep shots. Not that everything has to be deep with him, but there's some concern on the wide receiver room, which wasn't so much last year, even though Jameson Williams didn't start the year playing because of his suspension. But the Lions lost Josh Reynolds, and he was a staple. He was a very big part of the team, and that one hurt to lose him. So I think that as far as last year, the weakness of the team would be the secondary. The strength, I would say, would be the offensive line. And then this year, same thing. I think the offensive line, I'm not worried at all about the offense in Detroit. And I think it should be an exciting season, and we'll see. We're going to be relying on rookies in the secondary to fill some of those, turn those weaknesses into strengths. But I think the talent's there, at least to give them a shot to do it.
Right. You mentioned you think Williams might have a good year as you're saying a number 2 receiver, which I agree with that as well. He has a lot of potential, I think, with his speed and size. Who do you think has a breakout year
in Detroit?
Yeah,
Jameson Williams for sure.
Yeah,
he would be the guy. He's played well in camp, and the thing is, it was kind of the same last year with Jared Goff. He was working out with these guys in the offseason, and it was leaked that he just texted Ben Johnson somewhere along the way during the offseason after he'd been working out with Amon-Ra. And his text to Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator for the Lions, just simply said, Amon-Ra, huge year, or St. Brown, huge year. Like, it's not just that you hope it's happening or that it will happen, but there's tangible reason, and cause to believe. And so it's been the same thing this year with Jameson. Seems like he's been the star of the offense in camp and in the practices with the Giants so far. And so I think that, look, his first year he was coming off the injuries. Last year he's coming into the year with he missed the first, supposed to have been 6 and ended up being 5 games with the suspension. But I think he recognizes that the team's done well, even with minimal contributions from him, at least for what he feels like he brings to the table. I think he's motivated. He should be as strong and physically fit as he's ever been. And there's need for him to succeed in the offense. I think he'll get targets. I think he's going to get plenty of opportunities, and they'll be creative with him. So as far as a breakout player for the Detroit Lions, it is 100% Jameson Williams.
So we talked about Amon-Ra St. Brown. We talked about Jameson Williams. Leads me to my next question. Who do you think has a better wide receiver depth chart, the Lions or the Packers?
Oof. Oh man, that's tough. Probably Green Bay.
Okay.
I think Amon-Ra is the best of any team, between the two teams, receiver wise. But I think that in Detroit, once you get past Amon-Ra and Jameson Williams, now there's Khalif Raymond, who's a good player, but even with him, I think that Coach Dan Campbell has even reiterated lately, like their ideal usage of him would be limited snaps, and you want to have him returning. But Donovan Peoples-Jones hasn't been as good as they'd hoped, it sounds like. And so I think once you get past Amon-Ra and Jameson Williams in Detroit, you're thin. And so I think that the Packers, 1 through 4, 1 through 5, talent in that room's probably more than what Detroit has.
It's going to be tough to see who they keep and who they get rid of because, I mean, like you said, how many receivers do you keep on your roster? Do you keep 5, 6? I mean, they have it. They could definitely go. You think you got Dobbs, Watson, Reed, Dontavian Wicks. You got Malik Heath, Bo Melton. I mean, it's just, then you go to the tight ends. You got Musgrave and Kraft, who could just be monsters next year, this year. I think when I think of this team and the talent we have at receiver, I think of that Sports Illustrated cover with Aaron Rodgers when he had I think the year they won, like in 2010 or 2011, like Nelson and Randall Cobb and James Jones and Jermichael Finley. And I mean, it gives you those vibes.
Yeah.
But with a different quarterback,
Yeah.
I'm super excited to see these guys ball out. And it was funny what I think about, well, what are you going to do when they all come up for contract?
Right.
I just trade them away for draft capital.
Yeah, right.
Just pick 2 or 3 you want to keep and just use the other for leverage.
Yeah, and cycle through, because when you've got a good quarterback and a good offensive system, you like to feel like you can replicate that success. But I think that with Green Bay, that's what makes me nervous for them. Now, I will say again, the main hosts of the Talking Football podcast, which I'm a part of, Justin Tree, Stan Kiefer, Austin Cunningham, all 3 of them have picked the Packers to win the NFC North, which was tough for me to hear, but I get it, and it makes it fun. I do feel like the Lions, I mean, it's going to be neck and neck, right? But I
think atop the NFC North, it's going to be either Detroit or Green Bay.
12, 13 wins. It could come down to who has a tiebreaker. I think that they're going to split. The Lions went so many years without winning in Lambeau. And then last year, early in the season, felt great leaving Lambeau. It was such a cathartic win. It's like, man, this team's really coming together. And then Green Bay was the one that left Ford Field on Thanksgiving, extremely happy. I'm just glad that we didn't get the Packers on Thanksgiving again this year. Not that I think that the Bears are going to be a cakewalk, but I think that, the Packers, what gives me, cause for concern from them is it wasn't like a flash in the pan. I felt like once things clicked with Jordan Love, they were like, oh, these guys are good. And I think everybody's coming back. Right. And so they're, and they had Josh Jacobs. I just think that they're going to be probably by week 2, week 3, they're probably going to be right where they were week 11, week 12 last year offensively. and they're a very good offense. And so I also think the Lions have a good offense. So it's just going to be fun to, to see kind of how it comes to fruition and how it plays out.
Yeah, I mean, even though, the history between like the last 10, 15 years, ever since Stafford went to Detroit, he was a hell of a player. I was always, you never knew what to expect out of him on any given day against Green Bay. He could look terrible, or he could look like an MVP. And even with Jordan Love, his first year starting, I really didn't know what to expect out of him. I just knew that he was behind Rodgers. Rodgers was willing to like teach him some of the ropes, and I knew getting Matt LaFleur in there was good. I kind of figured Aaron was kind of hindering Matt LaFleur's, I guess, his offense. I think Rodgers would change, in my mind, change plays in the huddle or audible out of certain plays. And we truly got to see what Matt LaFleur was brought in to do last year without any, off the field drama. That's just my opinion, from the Kyle Shanahan tree. I really think we got to see LaFleur's creative side last year, and when it's run 100%, it can be scary.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that there's no reason why that wouldn't, continue in Green Bay this year. So it's going to be crazy. I don't know who's going to score more points, but both offenses should be really good in Green Bay and in Detroit, I feel.
Yeah, if we can kind of go off of that win in Dallas and use what we did there against the rest of the teams, it's going to be a fun year in Green Bay.
Man, that was crazy. So my one of my little sisters, my brother-in-law, and my little niece, I love them to death. They're Dallas Cowboys fans, and so I can go over and watch football games with them. And they were pulling for the Lions last year when they played at New Orleans, and then I stuck around and watched the Cowboys play and was rooting for them. It's this mutually beneficial thing. And then the Detroit at Dallas game, I was like, we were in a group text. I didn't want to talk to him for a couple days after. I'm like, oh, come on, and then it ended up not being a thing because it looked like the Lions it was very likely that they could have ended up playing in Dallas again in the playoffs. And I think that they were prepped to use that for fuel and motivation. But then Green Bay came along and, man, they just dominated Dallas. They just absolutely dominated them in that playoff game. And then they weren't that. I mean, they were right there with the Niners as well in the conference or the semis.
Yeah, that too. So like, there's, people like want to throw Anders Carlson under the bus. Dude was a rookie last year, and they brought in Greg Joseph this offseason, and they brought a couple kickers in for kicking competitions during training camp. And so far, from the last I saw, Carlson has the better percentage of makes so far this year. I went back and I kind of put Carlson and Mason Crosby's rookie kicking percentage next to each other, and Carlson had a better percentage his rookie year than Crosby did, but Crosby had more attempts. But still, my point is, people are ready to throw the towel in on Mason Crosby when he had his bad slumps throughout his career, but he ended up being the Green Bay's leading scorer.
Right.
How much do you take into a rookie kicker having a bad year, with all his expectations?
Yeah, the answer isn't always change, right? Like you can't just make change for the sake of making change. It's an easy solution, right? Like we just swap these guys out, and then that's going to be all we need to have happen. But I don't think. I mean, look, it was. I don't remember how much time was on the clock when Love threw that pick there that kind of, quintessentially ended the game there. But they were right there with them, and
right.
Yeah, I think that. At the end of the season, only one team wins, and you just hope that players learn from shortcomings. They learn from successes. They learn from everything in between. And I don't like when I look at the Green Bay Packers, I'm not thinking, God, man, if we can just get close, their kicker's bound to shank something, and that'll be why the Lions win. It's like, no, you got to just expect that the other team's going to execute, especially on special teams. They're going to get the job done. And I think the answer isn't just making a change. Not always.
Right.
Sometimes it is, but not always.
Yeah, and that too. What do you think of the new kickoff rule?
Man, I kind of want to wait to see how it looks when the regular season starts. Um, but from what I've seen so far, I don't love it. I
Yeah,
don't know if that's just I don't know. It's just different. It's new. It doesn't look and feel kind of the same. But when I look back at it too, it's not like the classic kind of kickoff. Up until this last year was necessarily like the play that I got way excited about. It was usually a touchback, right? It was a fair catch. It was it had potential to be a play, but they had to make a change, and then it was. Um, I'm glad that they at least are trying this instead of just eliminating it and just rolling the ball out of the 25 and saying, all right, here we go. So I'm kind of withholding a little bit of judgment on it. So far, I'm not super stoked about it, but I probably will end up falling in love with it before too long.
yeah. I think with having Keyshawn Nixon, I think I could see him breaking a couple free for a touchdown. Just that's what we got him for.
Right, and that's all it takes, right? The first, I'm sitting here saying, "Shoot, Brian, I'm not too stoked on it," but the first time the Lions return a kick for a touchdown, I'll be like, "Man, hell yeah, I'm all about it." So it's just
Well,
how
I mean, you
how it
think
goes.
about it. No one can start moving until the returner touches the ball. So that's.
What do you think about it? Do you
I
like it
mean,
so
I
far?
think I from what I've seen, yeah, I like it. I think there is potential to be returns and make the game more exciting. Um, but less chance for injury, I think, in my eyes, on special teams,
Yeah,
which is huge because you see a lot of people getting hurt with all these non-contact injuries and concussions and stuff like that. You never want to see someone get hurt. So I mean,
yeah.
if they're doing it to kind of save people's health, I guess I'm all for it. But then again, when look at the end of the year, if we have no returns and we have bad special teams, I'll be blaming the new kickoff rule for it.
Well, gotta have something. Gotta have something to chalk it up to. So,
Right? Who is your favorite all-time Lions head coach?
I mean, Dan Campbell,
Dan
which
Campbell.
I know that's like, man, that's almost recency bias, but look, for me, it was at the end of the Matt Patricia. So I loved uh, Jim Caldwell because at the time 9-8 was successful for the Lions, and they had a bunch of years where comebacks in that 2016 season where it seemed like coming off of Jim Schwartz there was at least a little bit more discipline in the team. Jim Schwartz had his contributions to the team too, but it to me it felt like Caldwell was a step in evolution and progression from Schwartz. So when they switched over to Matt Patricia, the expectations were high. Like 9-8's not good enough, and you could just tell that first game, Monday Night Football. I mean, even in the press conference introducing Matt Patricia, I was like, that was the most like I don't know. I just wasn't moved. I didn't feel like, but I'm like, all right, they're really confident in him. I know he's coming from New England, but let's see. The first game of his head coaching tenure, the Lions lost 48-17. First play from scrimmage of that game, they got a pick six. It was, so sweet. I was on my way over to Justin Treese's house, and by the time I got there, I don't think I spoke the rest of the game because it just felt like it was a gut punch. But you could just tell he came in, Matt Patricia, and everything that Lions had going well for them, he didn't build on it. He just broke it down. So when that's blown up, I'm like, man, it's I've been a Lions fan for, like I said, 21 years at the start of this thing. That it's not that I picked them because they were a losing team. It's not like I was wanting to abandon the Lions because they weren't winning. But with Patricia coming in and taking a dump on the franchise, and then Stafford gets traded. Stafford's my all-time favorite player. It was tough. And then, but Dan Campbell comes in, and I remember listening to his press conference and being like, everything I didn't feel with Matt Patricia, I did feel with Dan Campbell. I was like this guy's a leader. He's got it. He's going to be able to emotionally connect with the players. The question was X and O's. Is he going to be able to call the right plays or hire the right people to call the right plays? Well, he has. So last year was proof that one successful season can undo like 10 years of pain, so
Right.
Dan Campbell has done phenomenal work coming into the Lions. Like he took that mandate on. He wanted to be the Lions coach. When he was hired, first time they took him into the practice facility, he broke down in tears. Like it means so much to him because he played there, right?
Right.
And I've said it in podcasts I've done in the past where I'm like, that man's word is as strong as steel. Like he says something, he means it. And I think the players absolutely feel it and believe it. And now, all that being said, I have higher expectations for Lions this year. You can't just be the cute story anymore. Like, hey, you finally broke the playoff curse. Now, now you're at the party. You're one of the teams that you're not. It's not a playoff win's not this elusive thing anymore. So, but that's what he wants, right? He wants to have to prove it again this season. And so, kind of a long, verbose answer, but my favorite coach for the Detroit Lions is Dan Campbell.
Yeah, I like his attitude and everything. I like the fact that he wanted to have a lion on the sideline as a mascot. Thought that was pretty cool. There's no way the insurance would fall for that.
Yeah, right. But like everything he's done has just been, it's incredible. It's like, man, you think of a coach that's tailor-made for a situation, and even in that offseason, it was, all these names. You even heard of like Matt Campbell, the Iowa State coach, before you heard of Dan Campbell. And Dan Campbell joked about that at his press conference. He's like, that's how I got the interview, was I lied and said my name was Matt. And so, I was a senior, I think in junior or senior in high school when he was on the Lions. He was on the team that went winless. And, but man, he's got the right leadership style and the right bringing in Jared Goff, having confidence in Jared Goff. And when he makes a mistake as a coach, he owns it. And he doesn't seem to repeat mistakes. So when, the criticism that a lot of people have for him, obviously, is he's very aggressive with this, his fourth down, go for it. But he's putting all his chips to the table and giving his confidence to his players. I think that the Lions can repeat what they did last year, possibly even go further. But I just feel confident that from some random guy out here in Utah that says he's my favorite coach in the Lions organization, I would venture that 80% of the players on the team right now, if you ask them who their favorite coaches they've ever had, they might have some high school coach or some Pee-wee coach that, was super formative for them. But I would say that they're damn happy to play for Dan Campbell.
Yeah. I like him a lot. I think the two best coaches in the NFL right now are, I would go with LaFleur and Dan Campbell, just because the way they run their team, their organization, they own up to their mistakes. I'm not too, I don't know. I'm pretty high on Dan Campbell, just the way you see him participate in practice. He's out there doing, he's not doing up downs the right way in training camp, but that's okay. He does like more of like the triangle arch when he's trying to do up downs, but
yeah.
I like him as a coach.
But not bad for I don't know how old the guy is, but not bad given his age. And yeah, I'm with you. I think if I think best coach in the NFL, I would say Andy Reid, Sean McVay. There's a handful of names for sure. Peterson in Jacksonville, guys that have won Super Bowls and proven their mettle there. But I wouldn't trade Dan Campbell for Sean McVay to be all the respect in the world for Sean McVay. But I feel like the Lions have the right guy leading them. And I think the Packers do too. I think, like I said, last year, it was the start of the year. What did the Packers start through their first like 5-6 games? It's not like they were like one win, but at the start of the year, I was kind of like, I felt like, oh man, like the Lions are going to do this. And then the Packers were right there. And it's like, dude, they won the division last year, but it's like, don't think that the Packers are disappearing.
Right. Yeah, the Packers, they just had that halfway through the season it just clicked and they just came on like a hot mess, but which is good. When I guess like I think of like Lions coach, I think of like Wayne Fontes. like back
Right.
that way back, because I'm I was born in '82, so I'm I whatever. um, so what are your thoughts on Kelvin Johnson's retirement? Do you think he retired too early? Do you think it was the way the Lions treated him? Like, what are your thoughts on that? I've always been curious to hear from like a Lions fan. Like you think of Barry Sanders and you think of Kelvin Johnson, and people say, "Oh, the Lions ruined their career." What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that the one thing that you've heard from Calvin himself is he's been asked if the team had been good, would you have continued playing, or if they would have traded him to a different team and had a shot at playing. I know he was really happy for Stafford when when they traded him to LA, because it meant Stafford had at least a shot at it, right?
Right.
And I think that that's something where, for Calvin's sake, would have liked to see him have that opportunity. Look, if a player's given everything he can, he's sacrificed his body. He was a consummate professional. Never had a problem with Calvin Johnson. The Lions didn't ever, in his playing days. If they didn't want to give him a shot and let him go play somewhere else, I do regret that for Calvin. But I do think that, he left on his terms. And I think that you just have to be happy for him. I look at it now. I'm 35 years old now, and I look at Calvin, and I think he was like 30 when he retired. I'm like, man. But I also didn't play, 12 years or however long. He was probably a professional for 9-10 years, whatever it was. And Stafford threw him the ball over and over and over, and those hits just added up. So I get it. When you've listened to Calvin describe just the pain that he went through, even waking up in the morning, the pain that were in his feet, that were in his knees, that were in his hands. Stafford threw rockets. That he was actually asked the other day, like, do you still throw that hard? Their teammates complaining that you throw. He's like, he throws too hard. He said, not so much anymore, but he used to. I know when he was in high school, Stafford would go in the backyard and just like throw a football at wooden fences and just try to break the boards, because I guess you just associate everything with speed and velocity on a football, and you've seen pictures of Calvin's fingers just all distorted, and so it added up. I wish he would have had a chance to continue to play for a championship contender, but at the same time, as a Lions fan, if he went on and won with somebody else, it wouldn't have meant too much to me in the moment. I loved Calvin Johnson. It was different for me when Stafford went and did it with the Rams. I was so happy for him. But yeah, I'm grateful for the time that Calvin did play, and I wish he could have played more, but I certainly understand his reasoning.
Right. You say Stafford throwing like a rocket kind of reminds me of Brett Favre.
Yeah.
Breaking people's fingers in practice and games. And
yeah, it's crazy. I remember seeing it. I heard that from Stafford himself. He said, I was like, when I was high school, he'd go in the backyard and he would just, and you'd hear, I remember reading stuff like when he got to Georgia, his first practices, some of the coaches, or even when he was being recruited, they were like, they'd go to watch him throw, and they're like, you literally could hear the ball whistle as he's throwing it. And all the years of, having him as the Lions quarterback, I just remember every year in the preseason, the second, the third string guys throwing the ball, and it just looked like they were rainbows. They were just, and then Stafford comes in and it's just a laser. And, I think good quarterbacks obviously got to have some touch too, and the best ones do. But certainly, some of the highlights, you watch Calvin Johnson highlights, watch how fast that ball is coming in from Stafford. It's like, dude, it's a rocket, and your adrenaline's going and you're fired up. But I'm sure after the game, it's like, damn, Matthew, like, can just put a little touch on it, man. Not everything's got to come in at 90 miles an hour, but that's just what Stafford did.
Right. Yeah, it's crazy to you look at some of these receivers' hands when they're done playing, they're all mangled, like they've been broken several times, dislocated, whatever. Who was your biggest draft bust in your lifetime for Detroit?
Oh God, man, they've had some doozies. For me,
I think of the receivers when they were drafting all those number one receivers for like 3 years in a row.
Yeah, Charles Rogers, Mike Williams. I remember that draft and thinking, are they going to take Rogers here at 10? And they took Mike Williams, and then Rogers falls all the way to to 24, I think it was with Green Bay. But Mike Williams would be one. And it's tough because it's, these guys have talent and you understand why they're drafted now. And those Charles Rogers, Mike Williams years, I don't know, 13 years old. By no means that I'm just going off of, oh, they say this guy's really, really good. Cool. Let's do it. Cause I didn't, and even to this day, college football is not like my forte. I do follow the Utah Utes closely, but at a younger age, I was just looking at mock drafts and like, okay, I get, we got this awesome new receiver. And then until Calvin, for the most part, they didn't pan out. Ernie Sims was one of the first draft picks I remember the Lions taking when I was a fan of the team. I think he was okay, but it didn't pan out so great. Nick Fairley was another one who I remember one game in particular at New Orleans. He just dominated. But outside of that, it was, it felt like just a bunch of untapped talent and potential. So, yeah, there's a few others there. Titus Young, another guy that I think was like a second round pick that had some moments, but just couldn't keep things together to play at the professional level long enough. So, the Lions had a ton of bad draft picks. One that was even more recent that I will say I loved when it happened was Jeff Okudah, because the Lions could have taken Justin Herbert. They could have taken Tua. They could have taken CeeDee Lamb. Is Jefferson in that draft? I mean, there were so many players afterwards that became great players, but the Lions were under the mandate from ownership. We got to be playoff. They didn't say you had to make the playoffs. You just got to be in the mix for the playoffs. So it was kind of like this vague BS, but they had Stafford, who obviously, I would have been mad at the time if they'd taken one of those quarterbacks, because it was like, oh, now you're saying this is Stafford's last year, and I didn't want to believe it was. But to take a cornerback, and then he just got poor coaching. His rookie year did not go well, and then as I understand it, he just got real in his own head. He was overthinking a lot of stuff, and he's bounced around now. He went to Atlanta. I think he's with Houston now. So a player that I loved at the time, I was way excited about that pick, but it's tough to look back at the picks after that the Lions could have taken but didn't, because of a team and a blueprint that they had to, crumple up and throw away the next year anyway.
Right. Kind of reminds me of, was it 89 when the Packers drafted Tony Mandrich? And they could have had like Barry Sanders, or the top 5 of that draft class, 4 of the 5 made the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and the one that didn't was the one the Packers drafted. So you think back to whatever, but in my lifetime, he's got to be one of the biggest busts. I mean, there's other ones, but he was the number 1 pick, and he just a total reject,
Yeah, and then it's like, man, shoot, every team has him though, right? Because again, being a Lions fan, so many years, man. I had friends that were Bears fans. I had one guy that was a neighbor that was a Chicago Bears fan, and I remember, this is back before I had a cell phone. He calls and leaves a voicemail on the home phone, and he was just, hey man, just wanted to make sure you watched that Bears Lions game. And I'm just like, dude, I picked this team because they weren't good, but my God, can you guys just win one of these division games? But you look at it and it's like, man, even a team like the Packers, they have some ones you'd like back, no doubt. Even the best quarterbacks, right? They have throws that they'd like back, and it's just kind of the whole draft in and of itself is just such a fascinating aspect of, football fandom. And my guys at Talking Football are great with their coverage of the draft every year. There's so many platforms, people that do mock drafts, but I think Tree, Stan, and Austin do as good of a job as anybody covering the draft. And like I said at the start of this thing, anytime the Lions can get somebody that Justin Treese wanted for the Jags in Jacksonville, then I'm stoked, because last year it was Brian Branch, and then this year was Terrion Arnold. So I'm hoping for the same type of result. Yeah,
I'm excited about the Packers draft this year too. With I don't know, Jordan Morgan. I hope he can come in and be productive and stay off the injury list. But you got Javon Bullard and Adrian Cooper. You got Tyron Hopper that played well last preseason game. I mean, they have a bunch of guys that can ball out. Those safeties they got what, 4 safeties in the draft. So
how many of your draft picks there in Green Bay do you think start week 1?
If Cooper and Bullard are both healthy, I think they for sure will start. Those 2 for sure. I'm not sure about Morgan, but I think at least 2 or 3. But
who do you guys play week 1?
That's a good.
Throwing you off with
No, it's fine. I'm not even sure, to be honest. I'll have to look here.
I know the Lions' first 3 opponents: Rams, Bucks, because they.
We play Philadelphia in Brazil.
Oh yeah. Thursday, right? I think. So what is that? Like 13 days from now or something?
Yeah, September 6th.
Nice. Shoot, man, we're just around the corner. It's back, baby.
And honestly, I think with the addition of Xavier McKinney is huge on defense. Getting Josh Jacobs, losing Aaron Jones, we're gaining 3 years on the age there with Jacobs being younger. Jacobs came in being a captain. McKinney came in being a captain. So you have a captain on offense and defense. I think Javon Bullard and McKinney bring that swag to add with Jair Alexander. So I think the defense is going to be really good. I think, they extended Kenny Clark a couple more years. I mean, it's hard to believe. I've said it before, but Kenny Clark, it feels like he's been in the league for like 90 years. But
Right.
Guy's only 28 years old.
Yeah.
It's crazy. What I think, too, what I like what Green Bay's doing is these linemen that they're drafting, they're not necessarily like playing them where they played in college, but they're drafting guys that are versatile. Like, you have like Elton Jenkins, and you had, John Runyon back when he was on the Packers. You have Rasheed Walker. I mean, these guys are able to fill in positions when people get hurt. Like there's like 2 or 3 guys that could play center. And I think that's huge because you get teams that all of a sudden, like, their starter on the line gets hurt, and the guy they bring in for him is just terrible.
Yeah, you're putting Band-Aids on stuff pretty quick. Yeah, for sure. That's a concern with the Lions too. Is love the offensive line, but no team obviously wants to have an injury along the line. But I think you're spot on with that, Brian. They're versatile players and good coaching, and so you can, not panic so much if you have to go to plan B or C.
Yeah, and I think too with drafting Marshawn Lloyd, a lot of it was saying that he was the best running back in the draft, and the Packers got him in whatever round they got him. I can't remember right now, like the 3rd or 4th round, but was watching his highlight tape. He's like, the way he runs, his size, and he can he's there. He's not trying to avoid hits. He wants to take hits head on, and that's the kind of running back you want to wear the defense down.
Yeah, no, it was for sure one of those running backs. Unlike the year before, there wasn't your multiple 1st-round guys. So who ends up being the best running back from this rookie class? Yeah, it's could be any one of these guys. Brooks in Carolina. That Corum kid, I don't know if he was the first running back drafted, but obviously they've got Kyron Williams. But yeah, man, they're just pieces, right? And the good thing is when you've got a good offense, you're excited about the guys you bring in. Even somebody like Vaki for the Lions, I don't think he's going to get a ton of snaps necessarily unless there's injuries, but he's a versatile player, and they can throw him in at running back. He played running back and safety at Utah. But they're bringing him in primarily as a running back. They know he can run routes. They can give him the rock, and he can carry that as well. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting, and it's always fun to see like these guys like Puka Nacua, from last year that there's so many good players in the NFL that I'll go look at their Wikipedia and I'm like, this dude wasn't even drafted. Or it's a 5th-round guy and he's a very good player and an important player on a good team. So that's one of the beautiful things about football, right? So
that's just it too. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, when he the last 5, 6, 7 years in Green Bay, the Packers have never drafted a first-round receiver for Aaron Rodgers. I mean, look at what he made with what he had.
Yeah.
Devontae Adams, Jordy Nelson, Greg Jennings. I mean, they weren't first-round draft picks. You don't need to have a first-round receiver to have talent.
Yeah, for
It's
sure.
more on the quarterback getting the ball out there to the receiver to make them look good. That's why Greg Jennings, when he went to Minnesota and Miami, running his mouth on Aaron Rodgers, well, Aaron's the one that made you the money.
Yeah.
So, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's tough because there's 30 picks that are made in how many positions to fill. It's like, man, the guys that are great players, yeah, you're gonna fall back into second round, third round. You don't just have to be a first round pick to be a great player. But yeah, the thought was always like, as a Lions fan, like, oh, I'm glad they're not drafting these guys, because the worst thought would be like, God, imagine the Packers getting some number 1 or 2 receiver in a draft class, and then pairing them with Rodgers. But yeah, obviously it didn't really matter who Rodgers was throwing to, and that just speaks to his greatness. The great players make everyone around them better. And
I mean, yeah, I could fall back to Brett Favre. You had Robert Brooks, he had Antonio Freeman, he had Javon Walker. He was a big name coming out of college, and Aaron Rodgers made him, or Brett Favre had him looking good, and then he went to Denver and fell off. You know what I'm saying? So it's just a matter of who you have throwing the ball to you. So
yeah, for sure,
it's crazy. How do you think the North will finish this year?
I think it's going to be the Lions and Packers both at 12-5, and I think the Lions are going to have the tiebreaker. I think that the Bears are going to win 10 or 11. I'll say 10 games. I had the Vikings somewhere like around 8 and 9. McCarthy wasn't going to come in, and Darnold might be a better quarterback right now, at least to have started the season. It's a tough division, man. I'm going to go Lions, Packers, Bears, Vikings in that order.
Okay. Yeah. Like you said, I had Packers going 12-5, maybe best 13-4. Might be a couple trap games in there. You always get those where the ones you kind of look like the team looks at who they're playing, and they just come in and just crush them for some reason.
Yeah, they did that last year with the team that played at Ford Field on Thanksgiving, and I was just like, it ruined my Thanksgiving. I'm like, man, and the Lions haven't won on Thanksgiving in, I don't know, 5-6 years or something like that. I'm like, I'm so damn tired of this. And then they have they drop a game, and the Lions did the same thing. The game that they played at Chicago last year was rough. Obviously, the game at Baltimore was brutal as well. So I'm with you. I would say, I think best case scenario for the Lions this year would also be 13-4. I'm going to hedge my bet and say that they go 12-5, which they did last year. And I do think that the team added some talent, but you win 12 of 17 games in the NFL, and that's pretty damn good. So I think 12 or 13 would be best case. Yeah,
Thanksgiving was good, except for the turkey legs that weren't there for Jordan. Didn't they say that they how'd they even not have them there? Did they already have them dressed for the Lions, or they thought the Lions are gonna win, or how'd that go?
Do you know what? That's news to me. I didn't even know that happened, but I think what it was is when the game ended, I turned my TV off and I went to my family's for Thanksgiving. So I didn't even know that was the thing. They didn't, so the Packers didn't get to eat their turkey, but shoot, man, they went into Detroit, punked them, got a huge win. So if they had to miss out on some drumsticks or some turkey, whatever, I don't feel too bad for them.
Did you guys lose Swift in free agency? DeAndre Swift?
So yeah, last year they had kind of made up their mind, and it became clear after the draft. DeAndre Swift's a great player. He's a very talented player. I don't think that he showed the willingness to play through injury and play through pain to the level that the Lions staff wanted him to. And that's why they were so comfortable making that trade. They traded back, but they were targeting Jahmyr Gibbs all the way,
Right.
which is something that for me was hard to believe at the time. I thought, Bijan's like this. He was like, you're hearing about him as a running back, like Wembanyama was for the Spurs in the NBA. It's like that's the guy. That's the best running back prospect since, I don't know, McCaffrey or, but the Lions had targeted Jahmyr Gibbs. Brad Holmes talked about how much he went and saw him play at Alabama, loved him. And so, they drafted Jahmyr Gibbs. And then once that was made, what essentially it was is they just told DeAndre Swift, you don't have a job here anymore. And then they traded him to Philadelphia for, I don't know, 5th round pick or something, like a day or two later.
Right.
And then he's in Chicago now, right? So,
yeah.
As I'm saying all that, he'll probably have a touchdown or two against the Lions this year in those games. He was a fun player when he was on the Lions to watch. I have got no ill will towards him at all. But, I think that the Lions just decided you're not willing to kind of play through the pain. And, obviously that's got to be – I don't want to say anything about, I don't know DeAndre Swift. Obviously, personally, I don't know any of that. But from reputable sources, like people like Jeff Risdon, people that would know, that seems to be kind of the sense that they had that they were willing to move on from him.
Right. It was like in Green Bay. It was tough to let Jamal Williams go, especially to Detroit. Then see him dominate against us. A couple of years ago, he had a couple of touchdowns against us. It sucks to see those guys go, but you understand at the end of the day, it's a business, and you can't have 3 workhorses at one position demanding top dollar.
Yeah, it was one of my closest friends, Micah Hanneman. He played with Jamal at BYU, and I remember, it was like Swift and Jamal Williams. You felt good about that, a couple of years ago. And then especially when Jamal Williams led the NFL in touchdowns that year, it's like, oh, we got to bring this guy back. I think that the Lions, from everything I've heard, they made a competitive and strong offer. I think what he ultimately took from New Orleans might have even been for less. I think his agent was having him hold out. And if I understand that correctly, that's kind of how that played out. And then he didn't score. He went from leading the league in touchdowns to not scoring a touchdown, I think, until the very last play of the season last year for the Saints. They was a Winston. Somebody called an audible just to give him a handoff, and the coaching staff wasn't too happy about it. But Jamal he needed to satiate his need for the end zone again. But it was kind of a weird and uncomfortable thing. Like, okay, you move on from Swift, you move on from Williams, and then you don't draft Bijan, you take Gibbs, you bring in Montgomery, which you felt good about that. But man, I'll tell you, the 1-2 punch that is Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, there isn't a Lions fan under the sun that would tell you they'd rather have Swift and Williams. But yeah, I certainly understand what you're saying. Seeing him in the Packers uniform for all those years, and then seeing him in the Lions uniform, and killing. That was Rodgers' last game, right? He was a pivotal player in the game that knocked Green Bay out of the playoffs that one year, and ultimately was Rodgers' last game there. Yeah,
I think wasn't Rodgers' last throw an interception or something like that?
To Curtis Joseph. Yeah. Which, man, I can't tell you how many times the Lions and Packers played over the years where I just thought, like, dude, this guy is like a god. Like, he can't, the Hail Mary, on the phantom face mask that, and then it's tough because it's like, that wasn't a face mask. It shouldn't have been called, but you step back and you remove all that from it. As a hell of a throw and catch in that situation. That was just like, man, this guy's, you just feel like you have to be as good as you possibly can be and get really lucky to be able to beat him. So, the Lions, I know there's a lot of Lions fans that are, quite noisy and boisterous online. And, a lot of people, from what I've seen, it's like, man, it's cute that you guys had like one playoff win in 30 years and think you've arrived. But for Lions fans, it's like, man, let us have it, right? Let us just enjoy this, because I know that Rodgers had years and years of success in Green Bay, beat the Lions a bunch, won a Super Bowl. But yeah, it's pretty cool that his last throw in Green Bay happened to be caught by somebody in a Lions jersey. But now that's some time has passed from it, it's pretty easy to say, Rodgers is one of the best quarterbacks to ever play.
Right, and Brett Favre's first pass in Green Bay was a pass to himself.
I did not know that. So that's
player, and he caught it and ran it.
That's how you draw it up, right? Throwing a trick play. Shit, if I was playing quarterback, I wouldn't mind if the coach called it. Hey, Riley, we're gonna just let you throw one to yourself. So I get the pass attempt and the completion and the yardage. I'll take it. That'd be good for your if you were your own fantasy quarterback. I'm sure.
If bounced off of a player and you caught it and you ran it, I don't know how much you got, how many yards. But that's just a little fun history there for you.
Love it.
I never have a podcast where I don't ask a guest. This will be the last question, by the way. I've asked you everything about football, not everything, but about, quite a bit about the Lions, some questions about the Packers. What is your favorite type of cheese?
Ooh, favorite type of cheese. Oh man.
Cheese Talk podcast, not talk about cheese.
You know what? You're right. And I did, I went through and I listened to, a bunch of the previous episodes and just kind of getting myself ready to go for this. I'm going to say like provolone. I love cheesecake. I'll say that. My grandma used to make the best cheesecake in the world, and my sister Brandy now replicated the recipe. I don't know how she did it, but cheesecake is like my thing. I could live off of it. But just we're talking cheese, provolone.
All right. Yeah, I have a cheese shop by me. If you haven't heard, I like the ghost pepper cheese. That's my favorite.
Yeah,
it puts a little heat in your mouth, but it's good.
Yeah.
But Riley, I want to thank you for being on tonight's episode.
My pleasure.
Hopefully in the future we can have you back on again, or I can have you back on again if you don't mind.
Yeah.
We'll have to discuss the Lions and Packers games this year and get your take on what happened. And where can people find you at?
Yeah, my personal Twitter handle is at Riley L. O'Brien. And again, the only reason I'm here is from the Talking Football podcast. That's at Talking_football. Be sure to listen and subscribe. These guys, Tree, Stan, and Austin. This thing started. Talking Football started in 2019. 336 episodes in now. They do weekly episodes all throughout the season. College football, NFL. They do daily bets, your weekly bets, the parlays, everything's there. So yeah, if I'm plugging something for sure, give us a follow over at Talking Football.
Absolutely. I'll go and give you guys a shout out at Talking. I'm pretty sure they're mutuals with me on Twitter, Talking Football. Where they are. Yeah. I just noticed that my head kind of blends in with
looks good, man.
Behind me. It's kind of weird. It's like my head
looks good. You look like you're ready to throw that helmet on and go snap. You've been lifting or something, or you lift weights? You're probably
No, I don't. I can't. I have a bum shoulder. I have a bad shoulder. Gotcha, but I will be at the game tomorrow. So nice. Yeah, Little Kings Baltimore. So yeah, they had a joint practice yesterday. Well, Baltimore has been in town for like 3 or 4 days, and there's always that tradition in Green Bay where they ride bikes from like across the road to the practice, whatever. And the Ravens are riding bikes yesterday too, so that's kind of cool.
Are you? How far are you from Lambeau Field?
I'm 10 minutes.
Nice, man.
So it's even I tell everybody, even if you're not a Packer fan, you could they have a Packers Hall of Fame inside the stadium.
Mm-hmm.
Packers Pro Shop is huge, and I think the stadium is open 364 days out of the year, and they have the Hall of Fame. Even if you're not a Packer fan, to see some history, it would definitely be, if you're ever in Green Bay, I recommend going. 2 stories. They have worn cleats, jersey pants, Reggie White. They have, Charles Woodson, Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers. I mean, they have all the history of the day. Yeah. It's just amazing.
Yeah. Well, shoot, man, if I'm ever out there, I know Dan, one of our hosts, I think's out in Wisconsin, and yeah, if I'm ever out that way, I'll hit you up. Knowing you're 10 minutes away from historic Lambeau Field, I'll have to get out there for when the Lions go out and play.
All right. Sounds good, man. Well, thanks again for being on tonight. Appreciate it and look forward to having you on in the future.
You got it, Brian. Thanks, brother.
Thanks, Ryder.
Bye.
Bye.